the Australian Championship, the final. It all concluded on Saturday afternoon, 2-0 to South Melbourne over the Marconi Stallions. It felt like there was a lot of history steeped in this game. There was the lovely symmetry of the fact that these are the only two teams who played every season of the old NSL, Matt, and they met on Saturday to decide the inaugural winners of the Australian Championship. It was South Melbourne. Obviously, there's a poetic angle there as probably the biggest supporters of a second tier in Australia. They took the competition seriously. They made some big signings beforehand, and they were rewarded with the trophy at the end of the day.
Yeah, look, I think there was a beautiful air of symmetry about it. I think it delivered in the sense that we were just really glad to see it happen. But I'll be honest in saying that, with the narrative that Heidelberg were cooking up, most games played in an Australian domestic season, making the cup final, I just feel the fact that they weren't there on that stage came off a little bit anticlimactic, right? I mean, this is a Marconi team, with all due respect, that were thumped by Wolves in the back end of that group, and had a lot on their plate. And I think that there was actually something that kind of I found myself thinking about, where the actual intensity of the bracket and the build up to the back end of the championship was let down, ironically enough, by a few surprise results. Moreton City making it as deep as they did. I mean, good on them, yeah. And of course, Marconi, famous club. It was good seeing them in the final, but I felt that it wasn't the crescendo that we were cooking up in the sort of 5 or 6 weeks prior, if you know what I mean. So that's not to poo-poo the tournament or anything. I just feel that I was actually left with a bit of a sour taste in my mouth, because I think even the final itself, I think South had a pretty firm grip on it, So I felt that what was actually developing for weeks and weeks there didn't actually end up being the spectacle that we saw. But again, I think everyone's just been absolutely thrilled from day dot to see that we've got this second tier competition up and running. These games being televised, scenes across every state and territory that competed. A lot happened that was positive, and so I think that hype was really justified over the weekend. But yeah, again, maybe a little bit disappointed. I don't know.
Well, that's football, isn't it? I guess sometimes we don't get the narratives we
always want.
Of
the final before the final, right? Where it's like that semi between Souths and Heidelberg was like, well, this is the big one. This is, two teams that basically everyone had as... It was 50-50 as to, if you had either team winning the whole thing or not. I think most people went in with those two as the favourites. So, yeah, but that's just the way that, football pans out sometimes. You meet each other in the semi-finals and it kind of feels a bit anticlimactic, but I still just think the success of the tournament as a whole is the big story here. And it's just great to have seen how well it went, how everybody bought into it. It just felt like it was... a fun expression of football in a way, that kind of feels like we haven't had for a little while. And it was just awesome to see great scenes around the country, regardless of who was playing. Like you said, Matt, games being televised, good football being played. It's just everything everyone wanted from this, right? Except for maybe it not being a proper home and away season, I think is potentially the only gripe you can have with it. So I think the fact that they kind of nailed it from the get-go. That's, grand final aside, fantastic tournament.
Maybe what we should do is we should pick the 4 best teams that we think are most likely to win it and then seed them in the bracket so they don't come against each other until the final stages of the competition. What a radical idea that would be. But look, when we started talking about this competition in the lead up to it, Jacob, and Matt kind of summed it up in the way he spoke about it, is a lot of the bar for success of this tournament was actually just playing it. It was, okay, we have all these questions. Let's figure out what some of the answers are going to be in terms of what teams can bring in terms of crowd. South Melbourne averaged over 4,000. They were clearly the biggest winner in that regard, which when you compare it to a lot of the A-League clubs at the moment, we've seen several 3,000 crowds over the last couple of weeks. There's a very fascinating comparison to be made there. Obviously, there's a lot of variables with the smaller competition and whatever, but we're going to get numbers from the broadcast. Internally, clubs and the league are going to know about sponsorship money and commercial windfall. And Football Australia have said that, this is a loss-making tournament. It's going to lose them money, but they're going to commit to it for at least 5 years. They view it as an investment for the future of Australian football, which is what this is. This is base level. This is base camp. This is step one to grow further. And zooming out, I think, look, South were up 2-0 within the first 20 minutes. It didn't really feel like, apart from that weird ball over the line FES review moment, that South were ever going to let that lead slip. But, zoom out, South Melbourne, the club and the history, first champions, it does, make a lot of sense and will be reflected on that way. And looking forward to the future, I think there's a lot of optimism into what it can build into.
100%. And I think even, digging deep into kind of the South thing of, it was kind of boring because they went 2-0 up after 20 minutes. Yeah, but they've set the bar now, right? They've shown how to be just very, very good in this competition. And it's now kind of up to the other clubs to match that, right? It's like they've said, they've laid down the marker. They've said, here you go. This is how you can do it. This is how you can build a squad. This is the sort of football you can play. And this is the success that you can have. And, try and match us. And I think that's a great thing. They've played fantastic football the whole time, basically. And, they get rewarded with a finals win. So I think even though it's, a boring final in that the result was kind of telegraphed from almost kickoff, it's still, I think it shows that, as long as clubs continue to really buy into this, like they have done admittedly in this first season, it's just going to keep improving, and we will see, just even more great games, even, closer fixtures, and, maybe a grand final that doesn't seem like it's a foregone conclusion. So yeah, like you said, you just got to look at this as this is the baseline for what the Oz Championship can be. And I think people that kind of pick apart specific things are looking for things to complain about, or are looking for things to, kind of point out, if that makes sense, right? It's like, oh, but the crowds aren't great. And it's like, yeah, well, but anybody going in with the expectation of them getting 10,000 a week to games is delusional, or is deliberately setting the bar too high so that they go, oh, look, it's failed, right? I think that, yeah, like you said, look, you got to take a step back and look at it holistically and go, you know what, this was actually bloody brilliant. Like, this was really good. The big games did get good crowds. Even when games didn't have these massive crowd numbers, it still was a great time, really good atmosphere. I mean, you look at somewhere like South Hobart, right? A small ground and a small fan base, but how brilliant did that look on broadcast, right? So it's those kind of things combined with the fact that we're getting quality players playing good football. It's just in pushing the floor of the level of football up in this country. There's just so many good things that can come from this. And I'll be honest, before this all kicked off, I was doubted that it would succeed. I just thought, particularly financially, I thought this is, it feels like it's destined for failure. So the fact that it hasn't been that is so amazing. And, I'll be the first to admit I was wrong, right? And it's been tremendous, and I've loved watching it. And it's been just great to have extra football. You can't complain about having more football to watch, right? So it's just, yeah, like you said, I think it's brilliant to show, kind of, we've got something now. We can keep working on this. Like you said, it's an investment for the future. That's how everyone's kind of viewing it. And that's how we should be viewing it. Because, you're not going to go lights out on the first occasion. And, you don't want to go too big too early and blow it all and it doesn't work and you fall apart. You want to make sure that it's sustainable and that it continues to grow. And from everything that we've seen so far, it feels like it's kind of trending in that direction. So no, I think it's been just a great success.
I'm going to try and attempt the impossible, Jacob. I am going to make one complaint about more football. And that is the times that Football Australia broadcast or set on these games.
That's
right?
Fair enough, yeah.
So whatever the reasoning is, Matt, whether it is to not compete directly with the A-League in the view that people would sit down on Saturday and watch 4 games in a row like I did on a couple of occasions, or whether it was, something to keep the A-League happy in terms of not clashing, I'm not sure. But especially when you got to the latter stage of the competition and, you have finals games or, those ends of the group stages, a club like Preston, who are known for that kind of Friday evening atmosphere, playing it during the day doesn't quite hit the same, doesn't give those fixtures the best opportunity to succeed. I don't know, when you have a grand final, do you not want to play it at 7:35 on a Saturday night where your TV audience is going to be bigger? Yes, it's going to clash with the A-League, but is it not giving that match in isolation the best chance to succeed?
I don't know. My takeaway was mostly that I feel that Sunday slot in particular, where they packed a lot of games on. You'll notice the A-League, especially in round 1, 2, 3, they only had the one Sunday game, was usually a very early Sunday game, so it could pave the way for the afternoon slot where most people would then watch the championship. I think the thing that you really have to remember is, we've come from really just routinely having 5 or 6 domestic games a week to then having 8 in a competition that didn't previously exist, and then your 6 games on top of that, or your 6 games on top of that, 14 domestic games in a weekend that I guess there was always going to be some sort of clash, let alone when the women's competition sort of comes into it as well. I think you just have to sort of take defeat at some point, but to the extent that you can take that loss and concede a lot of things, I thought, again, particularly making sure that Saturday was A-League day and Sunday was Championship day worked out really, really well. And even the Saturday games, again, you were watching those Saturday games earlier on SBS going into the sort of evening, afternoon A-League slot. I thought they actually balanced it as well as they possibly could. And it clearly seemed to be that the A-League and Championship had an invested interest in working together to make sure eyeballs weren't stolen and people's clubs weren't competing. I know there was one clash with Moreton City and Brisbane Roar that really kind of I was upset with. But for the most part, it seems a lot of those clashes were avoided. And I think, again, when you're talking about creating a second division, I think the one thing that is paramount to a championship or a second tier success is its ability to actually be the kind of bridge that unites the pyramid, right? So we know that's like above the marketability of it, above the success, above the players that are scouted and those positives. The biggest thing that we all want is for it to actually be a uniting force to then properly have the promotion relegation down the road. So I think it's something that we've really got to be careful of, because again, you're talking the first season of this where we're trying to make it palatable for everyone, but 5-6 years down the track, how do we actually avoid these two leagues from becoming entities that are just competing with each other from a marketability perspective? And that's a question that I still don't think a lot of people have an answer for, because the Australian mindset and the Australian kind of culture around this is not used to having to consume 14, 15 games across 2 competitions. Like it's not a thing, right? So how the hell do we introduce it into the Australian psyche? It's hard work.
I think it's a good point, Matt, but I also think it's a case of they've got to realise, surely, you're not going to get the vast majority of your audience are not going to sit and watch every single game of football every week. It would be brilliant to have that, sure, but it's just not going to happen.
Yeah, I guess
people are going to pick and choose what games they want to watch.
100%.
It's about making those the marketable games be the ones that you're putting in positions that aren't going to clash.
Yes, I guess I'm saying all of this with an eye towards one of two things, right? The first one is that element of the culture and the psyche, and just being able to present it in that way. Now, if you just want to make the big Sydney and the big Melbourne clubs and whatever, and put them in your flashy Saturday and Sunday time slots, and that way it balances out perfectly, sure, that is probably doable. But again, you look at some of these places like Mexico. I mean, Argentina's a bit of a farce at the moment. The USL in North America. So many of these second tier competitions that are actually more in a position where they're competing and more in a position where they're trying to retain their relevancy. And these are some of the top football bodies in the world that can't even really figure that out, right? We've got the head of MLS clubs and state governments in the USA basically saying that if you bring the USL here, you're not getting your tens of millions of dollars, you're not getting your major infrastructure project. And we want to do everything we can to avoid that kind of situation here. And again, it comes with that natural ability of being able to unite and not compete, mixed in with how do we actually make this palatable for the Australian audience? And the balance of that is not one that we envy much, because it's hard work to figure out. But I guess, as he's saying, there is somewhat of a logical solution. What does it do, again, long term, 5-6 years down the track? Does it actually lead to sustained growth? And that's the question.
What do we make of the Champions League format, having seen it all the way through now? Because it's a very unique scenario where we thought we were going for this home and away league. We got 8 teams. We didn't get the home and away league, so then we decided, 8 + 8 is 16. That's kind of good group into knockout format, Jacob. the idea that keeps coming in my head, and we had Vince Rugari on the show a couple of weeks ago, and he talked about his idea of merging a kind of preseason league into, you know, something with these 8 foundation clubs and merging the two sides of football together. And I like that aspect of it. But when it comes to actually laying the platform for what hopefully is a full home and away season for an Australian championship with 10 or 12 clubs, could you not just have an 8-team league? You play everyone once. It's these big name clubs who are going to be the future of this league. It's not your odd premier, which I understand there's an element of, you know, rewarding premiers from different states, which is cool. That's a pro of this format. But if you have a league, you play everyone, you start to build this history, which is what this competition's all about, and moving it forward, all the big name players in the big name clubs, you play each other once, that's 7 games. Yes, there's an imbalance, but as we've talked about before, competitive integrity probably isn't the number one priority at the moment. And then you can have your 4-team or even like a 6-team final series as well. That keeps sitting in the back of my head as an idea that maybe presents the future of the Australian Championship a little bit better.
Yes. And look, I mean, the first problem that people have with it is that's not enough games for a home and away season. If you're going to do that, just play the Champions League format and have those premiership winning teams in there as well, and it'd be a bigger tournament. But I also think that, and we saw
I'm
that...
saying as a replacement, for this Champions League format in the little October, November window.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't hate it. Like, I think the thing that did work well with the Champions League format, right, is with it being the 6 games in that group stage, short final series, it didn't have the chance to, you know, lose the hype that it had built, if that makes sense. So I think that if you're going to do home and away, you either have to have, you know, your 12 teams sorted and ready and not kind of just experimenting with it, or you go smaller and have it as like a proof of concept. There's not really space to be in betweeny with it. So I don't hate the idea, and a shorter season I don't think is a terrible thing, especially if a lot of these clubs are going to persist with NPL football as well. And, you know, Matt, you touched on, you know, Heidelberg playing a ridiculous number of fixtures this season.
You got South with the OFC Pro League, the Victorian Cup, the Australian Cup, the NPL season that they're going to play, and the Championship. They will be getting close to like 60 games next season.
Yeah. So you know, a shorter season makes sense at this point, where, you know, their clubs aren't going to go, well, we have to sacrifice X or Y because we've got a 12, 14, 16 game season, you know, coming up in the Oz Championship. I don't think that's really feasible at this point in time. But yeah, I think that will be the question though, is if you do introduce a shorter home and away season with just like 8 clubs or whatever, people will go, well, just play the Champions League format because then we get to see more teams. So, like, you know, I don't know. I feel like I don't hate the Champions League format, to be honest. In the way that it is now, I think it's worked. I think unless you have the numbers to go all out, it's just probably not worth it, is it? I don't know. I'm happy to hear what you guys think, but yeah.
I just think that the Champions League sort of thing, I mean, you talk about rewarding premiers. For me, rewarding premiers has nothing to do with it. It's geographical integrity, right? It was about making sure the other states got involved. Yeah. But, you know, I know from talking to people from clubs about the operations, you know, Bayswater City, if they somehow manage to you know, make that quarterfinal, go all the way to the grand final and win the darn thing, they'd have got prize money at 100K, and they would have still made a very, very substantial loss in their operating, right? So, you know, and then even and I don't know if you guys know about this, but the way that they did the working groups, so each club was created into its own working group where the heads of the clubs would come together and work on logistics, and essentially logistics that operationally clubs couldn't afford, they would essentially be lent whatever they needed by the home team. The classic example, I think, was something around ambulances and paramedics. There needed to be 2 to operate for either side, and so the home team would pay the fee that was needed on being able to get it there so that the away team could be catered for in a way that the match became sort of a legal operation within FA rules, government rules, whatever the hell that was needed, right? But the fact of the matter is that that's a really scary insight, just hearing that fact of how quickly the costs keep going up and up and up and up and up and up. And the problem there is that, even if you do cluster the league into kind of that maybe 8-team Super League, where it is just your Victoria and New South Wales clubs, but the ones who are rich enough to afford it, even they, to the extent that, again, they can afford the licenses, that they've got all the money and the budget, they are still going to be running at losses. So like the competition really has to think outside the box. Now, I think more to the point that Regari made, because I very distinctly remember listening to your chat with him, Lachie. I think a lot of it was about the fact that something about the Champions League format just rubbed Vince the wrong way in being able to think about it as a long-term prospect. Like, how do you actually turn this into a tangible league? And then how do you make that league profitable? All the questions you need. I don't really think it's sustainable, nor is it profitable to just be running this over and over again. Again, season 1 was fundamentally all about just running the league and actually seeing it happen, and we've done that. Where do we go from here? Like, there's so many questions and so many variables with that it's really hard to know, and that's the problem.
And I think, having now seen the competition, I'm very interested to monitor what, like, the potential qualifiers then kind of move and how they talk about the competition. Like, is it an achievable goal? Is it something they're really striving towards? Obviously, they want to win their local competition, so they're not going to not want to do it, right? But knowing how much money potentially they're going to lose by playing in it, is the prestige of that worth it for someone like a South Hobart? If it'll be one thing if this competition is going to be around in this format for 30 years and this is your opportunity to go in and make a dent on the national stage. But if this competition in this format is not going to have a history to it, and in 20 years people really don't remember, then how much value is there in you losing a bunch of money and coming home after 6 games? Which, to my point, for the 8-team league, it concentrates the future, it concentrates the money, it concentrates the people who are willing to lose the money for the sake of a better future for the competition, and potentially it concentrates the attention of other commercial interests and sponsors and stuff like that. So it's a fascinating conversation.
It's just this is the other thing to it as well. I'm just going to add on. Is football even profitable in this country? Full stop. like we're talking about, we want these clubs to make money, and it's like, yeah, but you look at the A-League clubs, fantastic example. I mean, who among them is making money realistically? There's, probably very few of them. It's just a fact that if you're going to have a national football competition in this country, you're not going to be making boatloads of money from it
now.
Yeah, but I guess the reason we talk so heavily on finances is for the simple fact that we know these are semi-professional operations. We know these are still ostensibly local clubs, and so that's why the finances and the money is such a big talking point of their overall operation. And I just had another point there, but I kind of lost it in thinking about replying to you, so that's a bit awkward.
Well, I think when we talk about finances a lot, particularly with the Australian Championship, it's not about the eureka moment of making money. It's avoiding the worst case scenario and having it fall off the face of the earth. Like, it's kind of,
but I think that's the risk. That's the risk these clubs are taking, though, right? And I think that they realize that. They're like, well, yeah, there's a risk that it all goes over, and we've lost a bunch of money, and it's going to be difficult. But this is the best opportunity for us to get to to set up this national stage nicely, and I think
the overall theme there is important, right, Jacob? Because this is about when we actually think about what the goal of the championship and a potential second tier is. Maybe the goal isn't actually to naturally create a second tier that just stays in place and keeps going and operating for decades and decades. Maybe the idea is to actually get enough of these clubs to the point where they professionalize through running constant operations over and over again, going through the profit loss and understanding how to run it. Like we talk about Heidelberg playing 44 games, South Melbourne playing in another competition where they've got to fly to freaking Port Vila for a game, right? like the what you learn from that as a business and the operating of that professionalizes. I mean, it's called the OFC Pro League for a reason, right? It's about these teams professionalizing themselves through the trial, and the championship is doing the same thing. So I think ultimately, like, yes, there's a lot of questions to be asked there, but maybe if we actually rejig what the goal is, maybe just constantly being in that state of running like you are a professional club, maybe that's the point.
Yeah, it's a fascinating conversation, but it's going to continue for the next, I don't know, 8 months or 9 months until we get around to the start of next year's competition with our 8 inaugural clubs and hopefully 8 new and interesting premiers of our local competitions as well.